Welcome to this edition of Great Books, a lively discussion of a selection from the canon of exceptional literature. Here's your host, Jack Hatfield.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the Great Books Show. I'm Jack Hatfield. Our panel meets periodically to discuss great works of classic and modern literature. Today we're discussing Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Joe will introduce the work. Joe?
Tonight's selection, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, was published in 1865 by Charles Lutwidge Dodson under the pseudonym Lewis Carroll. Born in England in 1832 and educated at Oxford, Carroll was nominated to a clerical life fellowship in 1852 and remained at Oxford until his death in 1898. Shy and afflicted with a stammer, he felt himself unsuited for the life of a minister, but taught mathematics and wrote several books on the subject. But he is chiefly remembered as the author of the famous children's books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and its sequel, Through the Looking Glass, both published under his pseudonym and both illustrated by Sir John Tenniel. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland tells how the little girl dreams she pursues a white rabbit down a rabbit hole into a strange country where everything happens with a whimsical and fantastic illogicality. She finds that she can change her size by eating alternate sides of a magic mushroom, and she has a series of remarkable adventures with such celebrated characters as the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter, the Mock Turtle, the March Hare, the Duchess, the Dormouse, and the King and Queen of Hearts. Though Carroll insisted that in the books he meant only nonsense, this has not stopped generations of readers from reading numerous satiric and symbolic meanings into Alice's delightful adventures.
Thought we'd start off by just talking about Alice and what she's about, what her journey means, and maybe a place to start was, why did she go on this journey? Why did she go down the rabbit hole?
I don't think there was a reason, Jack. I think she followed the rabbit and fell into the rabbit hole. And I shouldn't say fell, followed the rabbit into the hole. When the rabbit spoke, she didn't say anything, but when he pulled out that pocket watch, for some reason, she was impressed, and she went after the rabbit, and he kept on running, and he ran right into the rabbit hole, and she just ran after him, never thinking, what am I doing? How am I going to get out? Why? She just went in.
On a different level, though, the opening poem or invocation or whatever you want to call it talks about rowing on the river, and in a lot of books that's unimportant or vaguely related, and in some it's key, and here it sets a frame tale. I think that they were in the beautiful day rowing in the boat in the hot sun, and she was getting tired and sleepy. And so she spaced out, and she saw the rabbit, and when she fell down the rabbit hole, everything started. That was the beginning of her dream.
Well, it also said she was bored with her sister.
Yeah, that was my sister.
She
was
was
bored.
lazy and daisy,
Yeah.
and the rabbit goes by, and she falls asleep, falls into a dream.
Plus,
That's how I took it.
Plus, she also is curious. I mean, she's a curious child.
Yes.
And she saw the garden and she wants to get into the garden. Mm-hmm. So she's both bored and curious. And then this rabbit comes along and takes a pocket watch out of his waistcoat, and that was all she needed.
But did she have to get into the rabbit hole before the garden?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. She followed the rabbit into the rabbit
garden
hole.
was in the.
Yes.
Once she fell down the
Right.
hole.
Right.
Yeah.
And then she was curious about the garden and wanted to get in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, no, I was
but the door
was using that
locked.
more as an example of how curious she was. That she just
And
liked
curiosity had
curiosity.
a lot to do with
Yeah.
what you're saying.
What I thought was interesting was that her sister was reading a book, and Alice didn't understand why her sister would want to read a book without pictures or conversations.
Right.
And then she falls down the rabbit hole, follows the rabbit down the rabbit hole, and every person she sees, she wants to have a conversation with. Even the mouse that she saw at first, she's tried to talk to him, even though he was a mouse. In different languages, she tried to talk to him. And when there was nobody to talk to, she talked to herself. Mm-hmm. So throughout this whole story, she's having conversations.
Conversations is the one, and the other is pictures. And if I don't know if you can tell, or if it's uncool to know, but the original edition had these pictures, the pictures that are famous by Tenniel. And there was a tight integration between the two. They were issued at the same time. It wasn't, they talked back and forth. What should this look like? What should this be? And so she was having pictures and conversations. So both of those aspects come true for her in this dream.
Why do you think that, you're talking about she meets all these people and has a conversation with, almost every one of them is antagonistic toward her. If you look at Alice throughout the whole journey, what is Lewis Carroll doing besides just presenting fantasy?
I have no idea.
I think he's showing Alice as a strong, not woman, but a strong girl. But the reason why some of the people are antagonistic towards her, or is that she barges in. When she tried to knock on the door of the building where the Duchess was, nobody opened it. So she went and she opened it herself, and she went in. When she went to the tea party, they didn't like her because they took one look at her and says, "There's no room."
Well, and she
went and sat down, and she wasn't invited, right? And then one of the guys said to her, "Would you like some wine?" And she goes, "I don't see any." He goes, "There's not any." She goes, "Well, that's rude." Well, so is coming and sitting down at the tea party uninvited.
She's aggressive.
So she was aggressive. She wasn't a laid back little girl.
I don't think aggressive is the word for it. I think guileless.
Yeah,
because
that's me too.
she innocently, as a child, asked these questions. "Okay, I'll have some wine. Where's the wine?" "There isn't any." It was an innocent question.
Yes, it was.
And maybe a rude answer. And she's, she's going in credulous of anything, and gradually she begins to accept the responsibility of more mature personhood,
Yes,
I think.
she does
It's a series
change.
of lessons, I think. There's a series of lessons of irony and things aren't what they seem, and rules of evidence, of occurrences, and the kinds of things a mathematician would, or a logician would pose to you. Some of the things she says, well, that's clearly absurd. A logician might say, well, what if not? And here you are talking to a young girl on a boat and saying, what if they all had teeth? And get them to think that way, critical thinking. I think these are exercises in critical thinking. That's what I think this is about.
I don't, but I think it might be, but I think it's something else. I was reading it and I thought, what's the significance of the garden? I mean, she looks through and she can't fit in the doorway and sees this beautiful garden. But once she gets through it, there's a lot of grief there. I mean, she's threatened off with her head, and I don't think it's the denizens of the story are negative toward her because she was aggressive or guileless. I think they would have been there otherwise. Well, you could argue that. So I think it's almost. First of all, I got this from you, is someone growing up.
I was just about to say that.
Why don't you go there and then I'll counter it with something else?
I thought it was a story of a girl growing up. And when you're at that age, when you're not quite an adult and you're not quite a girl, then you have to change yourself, depending on how the situation you're in. You have to be bigger and act more grown up in some situations, and you have to be smaller. And to get into the garden through the small door that she had to be just the right size. But she doesn't get there until she had a number of other adventures in which she was learning how the world works.
Experience and modulation and...
And also, looking at an adult world, it seems really strange. And the people have a different vocabulary than for kids, and words might mean different things. And throughout this whole thing, there was always a twist on, she said a word, and they said a word, and it might be tail mean the same thing, or porpoise and purpose, and they were always getting mixed up with the the words because she didn't know the vocabulary of living in an adult world. And a lot of it seems nonsensical to a kid. So that's why I thought it might be about growing up.
Her growing up, though, as an adult interpretation, Carol wrote this for children.
Did he?
Do you? Oh my
Yes.
I don't think so.
For the three girls.
My God, I think.
Well, let me say it a different way. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I think, like a lot of fairy tales, it comes out of their unconscious, and it's really something for adults. An interpretation for kind of adults.
Jack,
I think as being an adult writing something, you often put an underlying meaning in something that might be primarily be a story, because otherwise it would be just nonsense. So he's putting something behind the nonsense, but I think he did write it for children.
Right.
But if he wrote it for children, would he challenge them with that kind of interpretation? That, because
Sure, I think so. I think so. He'd say, and everything was upside down. It was all crazy. And we'd all go, no, you can't do that. They don't work like that. And stimulate discussion and critical thinking. I think that was part of the.
I think it's touching something deeper. It's like Grimm fairy tales, which are really something that strikes at something deeper. And anyway, let me segue into something. Yeah, that's right, and that's a danger because I'm going to get more Jung in here. I was thinking, why did
Carol wrote for the young.
Oh,
Okay. I'm sorry. Can we edit that out?
I was thinking, okay, here you're looking. A kid looks at adults, and everything's wonderful. I saw a comic strip the other day that said some kid is saying, "Boy, I wish I could be an adult and I could do anything I want. I have complete freedom." And his father, who's working, and this, all this stuff is going, "Oh, really?" And so then you get into real adulthood. And it's scary at times, it's very confusing at times, all those things that Alice went through. Anyway, so I go, could this have been written by someone like Lewis Carroll about himself? Could have been about Al. Here's someone who's very scared of life, really, and very, very withdrawn, and he's looking out and he says, "Wow, that really looks nice," but you get out in the real world and it's not.
Well, they're
it's
object
confusing.
lessons based on his experience.
Yes.
So it's the real thing for him, and they're cautionary tales, perhaps, about how you won't get fooled again if you know.
It's scary.
And remember the Duchess. Everything has a moral. And she went through, there were several pages of moral after moral after moral. So when you do write something, especially if you want a moral in there, and I just thought he did a very good job because it is interesting to adults.
Yeah.
There are different layers of meaning there.
I think that comment is actually very, very good.
Well, Victorian stories always had a moral.
I was thinking more. We are assuming a consciousness on Alice's part that is consistent with 21st century children. I have no idea how Victorian children. I have no idea how Victorian children thought. I mean, Alice already. I mean, first of all, did anybody have a sense of how old Alice was?
7.
I read 7.
I thought 7 also.
I thought 10.
Okay. Yeah, I thought around 7.
Around 10.
You thought around 10. Okay, so 7, 10. I mean, a 7-year-old in our society is not on the verge of womanhood. She's not on the verge of adolescence. She's a kid. And now, would that be true for a Victorian child? That was one thing. Let me
Probably not.
Yeah,
Somebody as screwed up as Dotson.
I don't think so.
Might,
I don't think
project
they're. Now, you're a teacher, so you would know. You would know. You have more experience.
Because it doesn't make sense to them sometimes.
I don't think.
Projecting onto a child.
He might be. I have to say that part of my job is to find hidden meaning and stuff. and although I see all your points and I thought of a few myself, the overall sense I got of this was just that it was a delightful. What's the word I want to use? Not distraction, not the word distraction. A delightful entertainment, something to do on an afternoon as you're rowing down a river. I mean, actually in this particular edition, I don't know if you guys have it. There's something that he wrote saying that a lot of what he wrote, a lot of what he said to these kids has gone. I mean, that as he was going down the river, they would ask him for a story, he would have a story. He would ask him for another story, that was a story. This one, no, Alice said to him why don't you write it down?
Write these down. Yeah.
Why don't you write this down? And so, why don't you write it down for us? And so he did that. And then he continued to add to it later. This wasn't something that came out all of a sudden.
Let's get back to the story.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that I'm sort of done with the story. Just my own sense of it. That a 7-year-old that I kept thinking a 7-year-old in the 21st century. This is much more mature. And this is what Freud called the latency period. You're not thinking about sexuality. You're not thinking about what the next phase of life is. You're embedded in the moment. But I'm not sure if that's true for a Victorian child.
But the
and for
adult
Alice,
is looking at the child knowing she will grow up and wanting to put some stories about that into as to what she's going to meet as she goes along.
But he was telling
and she did it
children
in such
stories.
a fun way.
They just asked them to put it in writing. They're children's stories.
Written by an adult.
I thought that some of the morals weren't that obscure, especially the way that he portrayed them. Every little thing would prompt the queen to say, "Off with your head," and you'd say, "Alice, is that true? I mean, if somebody doesn't tie their shoe, should they get their head cut off?" No. And a little 7-year-old would say that, and maybe carry it through and say, where is the reason for that? Where is the evidence? Or why should this be so? He's asking them to learn how to question. That's what I think he's going
And there were all these little logic puzzles, like, what's the difference between I see what I eat and I eat what I see,
That was a good
or
one,
I say
yes.
what I mean and I
wasn't
mean
that a
what
good-
I
Yes,
say.
that was a good one.
And they have arguments about these things, and they have arguments about the meaning of
A
words.
kid could do that, and it would make him go, whoa, wait, I'm so confused.
And one of the fun ones was she actually talks about growing up when I think she's in her house and her like leg is out the chimney, and she says, "Gee, I wonder if I'll think about this when I'm all grown up." Wait, I am all grown up. You know, and it was two different meanings of grown up because she's huge at the time.
See, I think the example of the queen off your head, we kind of know people like that, you know, that will strike out at practically anything and are all bluster and no go through. And I think that is something that throughout history has been people like that adults face as well as children face. So it's not, I don't think it's limited just that reaction just to kids' reaction.
Maybe he wants to say that such an attitude is laughable. So if you encounter these people, they're not going to follow through. It's laughable.
It's also scary at
That's,
first.
But it was
that's scary, of course.
It was also the king that went around saying,
that too.
don't take off their heads,
Yeah.
let them go.
it wasn't. Did someone say that nobody's ever really
The
beheaded?
Griffin.
right.
The Griffin?
Was it
Yeah,
the Griffin?
maybe it was-
Yes,
The
I think
Griffin
the
said
Griffin
that.
said that. Yeah.
Okay. He told Alice.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. No one's ever.
And he wasn't confrontational towards Alice when he first met her, right? And
The Griffin.
yeah, the Griffin. He was friendly towards her. And the queen only got upset with her when the queen asked who the cards were. And Alice said, "How should I know?" Very brusquely to the queen. And then the queen got upset with her tone and said, "Off with her head." You know, so I always thought that Alice precipitated the different creatures and
I
people
don't
being
think
upset
knowingly,
with her.
but
Not
she
knowingly.
probably said,
not
"How should I
knowingly.
know?" How should I know?
Yeah.
You know.
Not
got
knowingly, but I thought it was
exactly
because
the
she was in a
opposite, but
different
it's-
situation. But you
What
think
was
they
she? So she was a
deliberately
little
went after
brat?
her?
Yeah.
You thought you.
They went, I thought that no matter what she'd done, they would have
Gone after
been anticipated because she was anyway.
Well,
You-
she was
you were
a
gonna say something
stranger.
about-
No.
Okay. What else grabbed you about the story? You know, what's your favorite?
Humpty Dumpty.
It's not.
That's
it's not,
through the looking glass.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about
We're
that.
not talking about through the looking glass.
Never mind.
Okay. What you said earlier, you thought that Alice had grown more mature at the end of the story. She had changed.
She had figured things out, right? Like even she figured out how the mushroom worked by herself.
Left and
Even
right.
though the caterpillar told her something, she experimented with it until she
A
got
kid
to the
would-
right height.
A kid would do that.
She hadn't changed. Is that what you're saying?
You think she stayed the same?
Me? Up until I thought she said pretty much the same. Up until the point that you pointed out, where she sort of snapped back at the queen. That was really the first instance where it was more or less unprovoked. and she snapped back and asserted herself in a way that she really hadn't previously. She kept swallowing her anger, like when she was with the caterpillar, for example, and the caterpillar just kept giving her grief over and over and over again, and finally he said, so she starts walking away, and then he says, "Come back, I have something to tell you." And she comes back, and I can't remember what he said, but whatever it was, it really angered her, and she had to swallow her anger. And said, "Is that all?" She swallowed her anger, but this was the first time where she didn't swallow her anger, and that was up till that point. I didn't think that she had changed. Basically.
Were there lessons in each story?
But there were times when people said to her, like, "You shouldn't think," because she started out saying, "I think," and said, "Well, you shouldn't," and she got upset and she walked away from the tea party.
Yeah.
But then again, the Duchess said to her something about, "You should think when pigs fly," and right then the Queen came back, so we didn't see Alice's reaction to that. But there were things in there that someone should react up against.
It just occurred to me, and I don't know why, but we could be reading this precisely the wrong way. It may be the case that
Maybe you.
Well, no. I mean, come on. I'm going to tell you how to read it now.
There are various ways to read things.
No, precisely the right way, wrong way, the opposite way. We've been analyzing it in terms of a little girl learning how to grow up and critical think. I'm wondering if the issue was that Dodgson didn't already think that these kids were already too adult. That Victorian society had already made them less children than they should be, and so he wanted to present something which was bring them back, because a kid would be delighted by this, by the illogicality, by the weird juxtapositions, by the nonsense. Alice wasn't. Alice was thrown by it, and I wonder if part of what Carol was trying to do is, wait a minute, don't be such an adult. You're 7 years old. Here, come on back.
But as an adult, I enjoyed reading the goofy stuff.
What's that?
As an adult, I enjoyed reading the goofy stuff.
Right.
Especially a lot of the plays on words.
I
enjoyed them.
The opposite. I think kids at that age, whatever, 7 to 10 or something, are trying to make sense of the world, and they're trying to see the logic behind the world. And so, when it's thrown off by something that's not logical, then they really go, "Whoa, what's going on?" So it's just the opposite.
They liked this guy as they looked up to him as like a mentor or a big brother, and so they wanted to hear these tales. They were begging.
Let's get to the story.
These tales.
The story.
Yeah.
I'm saying, stick to the story.
Oh, bring it back.
Oh yeah.
Bring it back.
I think he meant he enraptured the kids with the story, and they wanted to hear of such things.
Yeah. And they were silly, like the time. Okay, that was fun. It was always tea time at the tea party. That's silly. But then you think, well, time is relative, so it might seem like tea time lasts forever. There's some kids probably think, "Oh, can I leave the dining room table because this is lasting forever?" Well, what if tea party did last forever?
He was relating to them.
Yeah, and what if time was a person?
Right.
And Alice said something like, "When I play music, I always beat the time." I said, "Well, that's why time is angry at you. You shouldn't beat the time."
Do you think the kid would get that?
Yeah.
Do you think the kid would get
it was
a lot
in
of
the
these
story.
puns? I don't know.
I think as an adult, I've been in meetings that you go, "Jesus, it's still 2 o'clock." It's 2 o'clock.
Somebody's setting the clock back.
Right. A little bit. This is I've forgotten what chapter it is, but she's talking about, I wonder if I've changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning?
I love that.
I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who the world am I? That's the great puzzle.
Yeah.
And
That's very philosophical.
how does that carry through the story? I think part of it is she's looking at, like we all are still, I'm still looking at, who am I? What's going on?
What size is she? She's big, she's little, that's something.
Well, the caterpillar asked her, "Who are you?"
Yeah, right.
Remember that?
Yes.
And she said, "I don't know."
Yeah, I wonder
right.
if a 7-year-old is up for thinking about that. I was a little older maybe when I started wondering about that.
But again, if we think about it in terms of Carol's gently trying to say, you don't have to be, because Alice basically, I mean, at first I started thinking, well, she's probably about 7 or 8 years old. Then I'm listening to how she's relating to the adults. I'm listening to her vocabulary. I'm listening to her thinking process. I said, this person is considerably older than that, but no, I think she's around 7. Again, if we think about it in terms of the possibility that part of what Carol was trying to do was to say, even though Victorian England says that by the time you're 7, you should have all your social graces intact, you should know how to think like an adult, you should be basically a little adult, a mini, yes. It really doesn't have to be that way. Why don't you come on back?
That's the same point you made before.
Yes, exactly. And what I was,
proof there.
Well, it's a support.
An example.
It's an example, right?
One of the great questions I liked was when she was at the doorman and she said, where do I go now? And he goes, well, where do you want to go? Like, it's up to you. And for every child, it's sort of like up
question.
to you what you want to become, where you want to go.
Why don't we quickly, we're getting kind of in, just go around your interpretation of the story.
I think that last comment was a good example of an existential question, and he was a mathematician, and by extension possibly a philosopher or a logician, and I think he would ask existential questions or ponder them in his own mind and worked it into the story.
Joe?
I think I said earlier, my primary reaction to it was that it was just a delightful diversion.
Well, I kind of just repeat what I said earlier. I think on any of these fairy tales, that some very deep themes come out from an adult's perspective, and that is woven through the thing. So I think it's much more than just fantasy for kids. So
I like to she was faced with a completely different world where the same rules that she grew up with didn't apply, and sometimes we're all thrown into that situation.
Great fantasy. And with characters, a lot of good characters in each story. But the adult interpretation really floors me because he wrote this for children. At least that's what I read. And what we're talking about is not childlike.
Right, exactly. Because it's written by an adult. But that's where we differ. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next time as we discuss another great selection. As Aristotle said, the best way to learn is to get together in small groups and discuss great ideas.